You know, my feeling is that while gambling is no quick fix, at a time when we're trying to find revenues from every place, provided we direct funds to those who deal with addiction, because at running the Center for Families and Children, I saw addiction every day, provided that there is substantial amount of funds that would go with any state that has sports wagering for those who become addicted, I'd be for it. But that would be a condition.
All right, Reggie.
Mr. Fisher, I want to take you back to a comment that you made a few moments ago that Wall Street needs a stronger watchdog. The next key battle in Washington may very well be over Wall Street reform bill, and Senate Democrats are already sort of divided over a proposed Consumer Financial Protection Agency. Some would like to see such an agency housed within the Federal Reserve. Others are supportive of a standalone agency. We'd like to know what your thoughts are on that. Which proposal would you support and why?
Reggie, I had a law professor who once said it's better to have a fence at the top of the cliff than to have an ambulance below. And the truth of the matter is that if we don't put a fence at the top of the cliff, then this economic recession could happen again. So I am completely in favor for a separate, robust financial watchdog agency, not part of the Federal Reserve, but its own agency. But that's not enough, Reggie. We also need to reinstate the rules that prevent banks from becoming too big to fail and separate the risky investment banking and trading activities of banks from the traditional commercial activities. Those two things in particular are important, and one solution won't do it. But I will tell you that deregulating Wall Street, which occurred during the 8 years of George W. Bush, is exactly the wrong way to go.
Ms. Brunner.
Actually, the thing that greatly harmed, that caused the most deregulation was the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1998. Banks are now not only banking, but they're trading in securities and they're buying insurance, and it's interfering with their fiduciary duties to their customers. But as far as the consumer agency, I would advocate a task force approach. There are so many different functions in the various agencies that deal with consumers, securities, banking, that if we had a task force, it may not have to have a life that would go on forever if it could focus on cleaning up the individual regulations within those agencies so that they were dealing together and working for consumers. It would be faster too.
All right, let's go back to the audience.
We all know who your opponent's going to be in the fall. And as a registered Democrat and on behalf of all registered Democrats, I'd like each of you to tell us why you think you have the better chance of defeating him.
Ms. Brunner.
In my 2006 election, I won the Secretary of State's race in a four-way race by 15 points, won 52 out of 88 counties. I beat my opponent, whose last name was Hartman, kind of like Portman, in Hamilton County, in his own county. Mr. Portman has not campaigned statewide before. He's raising a lot of money. He's going to need a lot of money. In the end, he seems like a very nice gentleman, but he is hardcore conservative, and I think as time goes on, Ohioans will see that I have a record of getting things done that help individual people, and that's what they're looking for.
Mr. Fisher.
Well, let's make it clear that Congressman Portman is the ultimate Washington insider. And he spent 2 decades in Washington, D.C., and he just didn't vote for George W. Bush's trade and economic and regulatory policies that got us into the recession. He was the trade advisor. He was the budget director. He was one of the chief architects. He was holding the shovel as we were digging this recession. That contrasted with somebody who's been on the ground, fighting every corner of the state to save and create jobs and has spent his life in Ohio, not the privileged corridors of Washington, D.C. I think that contrast is a winning formula.
All right, Deb, your questioner.
My name is Parker Smith, and I'm a freshman at Shaker Heights High School, and my question is for Secretary of State Brunner. My mother is a registered Republican, and a couple weeks ago, you came out with loyalty pledges. Now, my mom has every intention to vote in the Democratic primary, and I wonder, why is that fair to try to discourage people from the democratic process just because of the way they voted 2 years ago?
Thank you, Parker. I'm glad you asked that question. My mom's a registered Republican, too. So we labor under the same circumstances. But the loyalty pledges is something that the Republican Party decided to call it, and then Mr. Fisher picked it up, probably because the polling showed that it was a good thing to do. It's actually something that's been in the law for 57 years since 1953, and it is something that is required under the law. Had the Republican Party not put out absentee ballot applications that they sent to Democrats and independents, not just Republicans, that were erroneous and allowed them to receive a ballot, made them think they could receive a ballot, not just for the primary, but for the general, which is against the law, this issue wouldn't have been something that cropped up at the late point in time. But also when we start to look at the fact that there was a lot of gaming that went on in the 2008 primary election, we knew that the boards of elections did not uniformly enforce this. We're trying to get the boards of elections to respect the rights of voters no matter where they are in the state of Ohio, so we've got the kind of uniformity that we need to not violate equal protection.
All right, Mr. Fisher, I see you chomping at the bit.
No, I'm not chomping at the bit, but first of all, Jennifer's been a very good Secretary of State, and she and I both care deeply about voting rights and doing everything we can to tear down barriers to voting, which is why I criticized her directive, because it was exactly the opposite. She issued an 11th hour directive days before absentee ballots were to be sent, imposing unnecessary barriers to voting, and it was roundly criticized by newspapers and Democrats around the state. And look, I'll never shy away from pointing out legitimate policy differences between me and my opponents, and in this case, Jennifer's policy was wrong.
All right, Ms. Kessler.
The Democratic Party did not endorse either you or Ms. Brunner. And it's been reported that you sought the endorsement and then something happened, a flood of protests, party chairs didn't want to do it. It's been reported in different ways. But you've also now been quoted as saying you didn't actually seek the endorsement. So can you clarify what happened here?
Well, Karen, first of all, let me say to you that I did want the endorsement of the Ohio Democratic Party. And I sent a letter reserving that option. And then Jennifer's campaign chose to send some emails to the supporters. And, you know, there are about 120 members. We had about 110 votes. And to be honest with you, I just decided that even though I had the votes, it just wasn't worth it, because she and I need to work together on May 5th, whether she wins or I does. And if it was going to cause that kind of division, it just simply wasn't worth it to me. So the bottom line is, yes, would I have received the endorsement, but was it worth it, given the fact that it would have divided our party and divided our supporters? It wasn't, so I decided to withdraw my request.
Ms. Brunner.
Well, I talked in my opening statement about this new paradigm. In 39 hours, there were 74,000 emails sent to state executive committee members, and we decided to ask them to not send any more once we got into the Monday. And so from 7 a.m. until 10 a.m., we then asked our supporters to send letters to the editor asking Mr. Fisher to withdraw his request for endorsement. There were almost 1,000 of those sent, and finally Mr. Fisher withdrew his request for endorsement. I think those things speak for themselves.
All right, Carrie, back to your questioner.
Good afternoon. As you both are aware, because of poorly written federal law, not a surprise, our state and the nation as a whole are using poorly designed and voting equipment with buggy software and capable of being hacked. This has been documented by the best computer scientists in the world, basically, but certainly in our state and nationally. So the best antidote that has been recommended by the computer scientists, statisticians, and others has been to engage in post-election auditing. So the question is, given that there are bills and have been bills pending before Congress for many years to require post-election auditing in all federal elections, is this a principle and a bill that you would support if you are our next United States Senator? Thank you.
Ms. Brunner, you go first.